The leadership vacuum created by the impeachment of former President Park Geun-hye has finally been filled. Moon Jae-in has been elected the 19th president of Korea with over 41% of the vote. He inherits a country that faces a number of challenges, including a U.S.-China tug-of-war over THAAD deployment, as well as a potential renegotiation of the Korea-U.S. FTA. But there are also high hopes for President Moon Jae-in, who has built himself as a prepared president since he won the presidency on his second try.
A new president has been elected to lead Korea for the next 5 years.
존경하고 사랑하는 국민 여러분, 감사합니다. 국민 여러분의 위대한 선택에 머리 숙여 깊이 감사드립니다. 저는 오늘 대한민국 제19대 대통령으로서 새로운 대한민국을 향해 첫걸음을 내딛습니다.
Moon Jae-in has emerged as a winner in the fierce race to the nation's top office. With growing instability at both home and abroad, he has tremendous challenges lying ahead of him.
안보 위기도 서둘러 해결하겠습니다. 한반도의 평화를 위해 동분서주하겠습니다. 필요하면 곧바로 워싱턴으로 날아가겠습니다. 베이징과 도쿄에도 가고 여건이 조성되면 평양에도 가겠습니다. 한반도의 평화 정착을 위해서라면 제가 할 수 있는 모든 일을 다하겠습니다. 한미동맹은 더욱 강화하겠습니다. 한편으로 사드 문제 해결을 위해 미국 및 중국과 진지하게 협상하겠습니다.
During an interview with Reuters on April 27th, U.S. President Donald Trump hinted at a possible renegotiation or termination of the South Korea-U.S. FTA.
It's unacceptable. It's a horrible deal made by Hillary. It's a horrible deal, and we're going to renegotiate that deal or terminate it.
He also said he wants Seoul to pay the cost of the THAAD missile defense system, which he estimated to be $1 billion.
So, I informed South Korea that it would be appropriate if they paid. Nobody's going to do that. Why are we paying $1 billion? It's a $1 billion system.
Meanwhile, China has taken a series of retaliatory measures against South Korea's decision to host the THAAD system on its soil.
美韩在韩国部署萨德反导系统，将破坏地区的战略平衡，进一步刺激半岛的紧张局势。
According to a recent report, China's THAAD retaliation is expected to cost the Korean economy up to $7.47 billion this year. Amid speculations that China will be escalating its economic retaliation, many Koreans call for the government to take decisive action. The new administration has taken office with high hopes from the public. What strategies and solutions will it employ to handle the rising economic and diplomatic uncertainty? On this week's Upfront, a key advisor from the Moon Jae-in campaign joins us to shed light on what the new administration's economic and diplomatic policies will look like.
For today's discussion, we are joined by Choi Jong-kun, professor in the Department of Political Science and International Studies at Yonsei University. He was advisor to the Moon Jae-in campaign on matters related to diplomacy, national security, and the economy.
Thanks.
Well, President Moon was sworn into office on Wednesday, the day after the election. It was a really speedy process, and he gave his inaugural address. Any noteworthy points from his inaugural speech?
There are a couple of points that we need to basically emphasize here. He emphasized the notion of unity within the nations. Right after the election, he was emphasizing that we shouldn't be divided over ideology, class, or where you live, basically, so that he was trying to send a signal to the nation that he's opening up a new door so that we are reuniting it under his leadership. And second of all, he was emphasizing his leadership style, which is communication. He basically believes in the virtue of communicating with his people as well as his staff, which we thought we lacked before. the lastly, not the least, but he was emphasizing the peace and the stability on the Korean Peninsula and the safety of the South Korean people, so that basically he would exercise his active leadership to resolve and enhance the current crisis on the Korean Peninsula.
Well, he emphasized that he wants to bring sweeping changes not only to politics,
Yes.
but Korea as a nation. Now, one of the hottest issues during the campaign was U.S. President Donald Trump's repeated
Yes.
comments that Korea should foot the bill for the THAAD missile defense system. There's a lot of controversy surrounding THAAD, both in and outside of Korea. How do you think President Moon is going to address those controversies?
President Moon's platform, as far as the THAAD issue was concerned, was pretty consistent during the election period and the days before. He was basically arguing that we should be able to review very thoroughly because such decision would affect South Korea national security. And such decision should not have been made such abrupt manner, so that we should be able to make a thorough review as just as the normal democratic states do. In other words, I think that Mr. Moon would take a look at the matter very, very carefully and considering its impact upon our relationship with the United States, our strategic relationship with China, and what kinds of military implications it would have vis-a-vis North Korea. And also mostly, what kinds of impact it has on people in Seongju area where THAAD would be deployed. So there are many variables and juggles things to do.
So we can't rule out the possibility that the whole THAAD issue will be reviewed from the very beginning, that it may even be scrapped.
No, review does not necessarily mean reject. If Mr. Trump was right, arguing that we should pay for it, then that automatically would mean that we need to renegotiate the terms of the state of forces agreement with the United States. If we do that, then it's not the president that negotiates the terms of it. He obviously has to direct Ministry of Foreign Affairs to negotiate it, but the contents of the SOFA has to be ratified by the National Assembly. In other words, it is parliamentary process that will have a final say on the SOFA agreement if we have to pay for the THAAD operation. But I don't think that that's going to happen, though, because the crux matter of the alliance is embedded into the contents of the SOFA. And the SOFA has to be reciprocally coordinated between Washington and Seoul.
But SOFA is up for renegotiation during President Moon's term as well as President Trump's
No, basically
term.
you're talking about burden sharing agreements.
Right.
So burden sharing will be negotiated starting from early 2018
Right.
because it is due to be expired by the end of 2018. So that it's a 5-year term, so that how much we contributed to United States forces in Korea is up for renegotiation, and we both all agree anyhow.
Now, the issue of THAAD costs, some say, has put the Korea-U.S. alliance to the test. Others have expressed concern about Washington and Beijing possibly bypassing Seoul in important decisions about the Korean Peninsula.
That would have been a possibility, but now Mr. Moon is a president, and essentially we are looking at a new Korea. In other words, this president is really, really willing to work with the United States and sit down with Xi Jinping in Beijing, basically wanted to be in the driver's seat, setting a landscape of South Korea security and stability. In other words, it has to be us, South Korea, that determines the fate of Korean people here. In that regard, that has to be essentially reconsidered and reformulated and go through review process so that we decide whether it is good for us or bad for us. If it is good for us, then we go ahead and install the THAAD as it has been.
And if it's not?
If it's not, then we have to use it as a diplomatic card to make a leverage with the Beijing and the United States. And if it's really, really, really bad, then why not, withdraw it? Because at the end of the day, the President of the Republic of Korea has to concern only one thing, that is interest of South Korea and safety of the South Korean people.
Now, President Moon has emphasized what you just said throughout his campaign period, that he wants to take the lead while working with Washington on matters related to the Korean Peninsula. How would he go about doing that, though?
Basically, as just no other governments would do, he would go through a very intensive policy review of foreign policy. What I mean by foreign policy is the foreign policy that has been formulated for the last 8 or 9 years under the conservative governments. Basically, he will inherit things that we think it's good for South Korea, and also make a change if we think it's feasible. But at the end of the day, our alliance with the United States is our rock bottom foundation of South Korean security. And we want to really clearly signal to American people that alliance is very much a backbone of our national security. But that's not enough, though. In other words, we need to have much more manageable inter-Korea relations. We want to have much more effective sanction on the North Korea. We want to have much more working relationship with Beijing, so that even if we have to really sanction North Korea harder, we cannot do it without cooperation from Beijing. If we want to engage North Korea, we cannot do it without cooperation from Beijing and the United States. In other words, consultation, cooperation would mean that we will really work around with these major states near, in and around the South Korea, and we will take the lead.
So we don't have to worry about the Korea-U.S. security alliance.
Korea-U.S. security is based upon alliance and alliance in institution. And our alliance with the United States is pretty much stable, no matter who becomes the president. You know, we have a president of the United States, and he's a Trump. He talks about things that are very abnormal to the institution of the two alliances. However, we trust the institution. And I really look forward to days where Mr. Moon and Mr. Trump sit down together and work things out.
Yeah, well, people do say that a summit between President Moon and President Trump should be arranged as soon as possible. Would you agree?
Yes, in principle. But think about it. This election came very abruptly.
Yeah.
And he was elected on the Wednesday and sworn into on the Wednesday. We didn't have a period of transition. I think that we have to somehow look for a possibility of having a summit ASAP, but we don't really want to push it because we want to have two leaders sit down in the most comfortable manners. And it has to be our president that has to be also comfortable as well.
Any educated guess about when such a summit might actually happen?
The diplomatic calendar says that we have a G20 meeting in Frankfurt in July. So then there will be our first official meeting with Mr. Trump. But should there be anything that happen between now and July, why not having a summit in Washington, D.C.?
Now, Korea also has China to deal with. What started out as a political and diplomatic row over that has spilled over into economic relations. And as of yet, there is no sign of an early resolution. How do you think Korea should respond?
We cannot sustain our economic growth without strengthening economic relationship with China. Whether we like it or not, we happen to live right next door to Beijing. So that China is the largest and the still fastest growing economy of the world. Who knows what's going to happen in China in about 5 or 6 years? It might be the largest as well. So that we need to work with China to work things out. In other words, as long as we show a sincerity in resolving the thought issue, rather than dumping the thought issue on Beijing's face, then I think that our genuine resolution would be persuaded by our Mr. President, and also China, I think, will be a great partner to work with. But at the end of the day, our economic prosperity is very much globalized, so that we need to work out a very in detailed manner with a very prudent attitude, and basically we cannot antagonize Chinese people, whether we like it or not. I think it's an economic reality.
But how would we persuade China?
Well, obviously, the new government just comes in very recently, but I think that Mr. Moon administration has a very close working plan to sit down with Xi Jinping. Basically, from a Beijing's perspective, they do not want to see instability on the Korean Peninsula. And it's not good for them if South Korean economy goes down very badly. So that, which means that Beijing and South Korea has a great level of economic interdependence. So that I think that we should demand a couple of things. First one is that they should not be antagonizing South Korean people. And then second, they should not hijack the THAAD issue and therefore do not make the THAAD issue into every single issue between Korea and China. In other words, we need to separate economics from politics. Economic cooperation has to go on, and politics has to be worked out between the two leaders.
But Korea has been trying to do that.
But we, we have a different leader now. This leader
Different leader, a different approach, perhaps?
different leader, different president, different administration, made up of the people who thinks that our relationship with the United States is rock bottom solid. Yet we need to work things out with Beijing. We do not want to antagonize our relationship with China. We value our relationship with China anyway. We're very much a pragmatist and flexible. So that different people, different mindset, and who understand better the mindset of Chinese people.
I have a feeling, though, Seoul is going to often find itself stuck between these two superpowers in their, power game, in their struggle to hold control of the region. So what kind of diplomatic maneuver?
I disagree with your question. Basically, we're not going to be stuck between the two. In other words, we are going to, basically, there are common agenda between Beijing, Seoul, and Washington. First and foremost is the denuclearization of North Korea in a very peaceful manner. Second of all, Washington, Seoul, and Beijing agreed that United Nations Security Council resolution sanction has to be consistently applied, and we agree. And the third and the most, three countries agree that there should be no military conflict on the Korean Peninsula. In other words, three countries agree on the big things. And therefore, on a very specific North Korea/Korean Peninsula issue, there's much more possibility that we can work things together. The reason why we had somehow bumps and trouble before was that we tend to too much rely on one issue, that is sanction. But the spirit of the sanction is to bring North Korea back to the negotiating table, and that's what Chinese and we believe at the same time. And I believe the United States would also agree to.
Well, for now, though, U.S. President Donald Trump has maintained a very hardline position against North Korea.
Well, hardline, I don't know. Because the commonality between Mr. Moon and Mr. Trump is that they both are deal maker. Mr. Moon has been long time civil rights lawyer. And also he defended the rights of the labor against the corporate. In other words, he has been making deals between the labor and the corporate. And as the president of the Democratic Party, he made a lot of deals with a very big name politician, even though he was a political novice. On the other hand, as we all know, Mr. Trump was a big-time real tycoon. He made a lot of deals. When you're looking at the deal makers, they only focus on interest. That's why Mr. Trump has always argued that make America great again, America first. Our president is the same thing. Mr. Moon puts Korean interests first. So that I think that they will be able to find out and coordinate the commonality between the two. And our commonality is already big anyway as an ally. So I think that, Mr. Trump and Mr. Moon will be a great working partner.
What about with North Korea? What kind of projections would you make about inter-Korean relations?
It's hard to predict, to be really honest with you. Why? Because we are dealing with different North Korea, maybe. Because we used to deal with Kim Jong-il's North Korea.
Right.
And 10 years passed, almost. Now we are looking at Kim Jong-un's North Korea. And we don't know what kind of North Korea Kim Jong-un is ruling.
He's a lot more unpredictable.
Yeah, unpredictable, predictable doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, you can only find out unless you can talk to it. In other words, Mr. Moon's administration is much more flexible and pragmatic. He's not talking to North Korea as an ideological issue. We need to be pragmatic dealing with North Korea because at least we need to find out what North Korea thinks. Therefore, we are able to deal with North Korea, whether we want to sanction it more or engage it more. In other words, we will be much more flexible dealing with North Korea. Of course, there's an issue of denuclearization. Of course, there's an issue of coordination with Washington, D.C., as well as Beijing. These will be very carefully crafted and coordinated and then approach North Korea. We're not going to make conversation or negotiation with North Korea as a prerequisite. Basically, we are going to be much more flexible and open about it.
Now, moving on to some economic issues, there is another urgent issue awaiting President Moon. U.S. President Donald Trump has ordered his staff to review all of America's trade deals, including the Korea-U.S. FTA. How do you think the new administration will respond if there is a U.S. request to renegotiate the trade deal?
Officially, as I know, there has not been official request.
Not yet.
And also, I think that there are a thorough review is going on in the United States. But if that time comes, I think that why not? In other words, we have two pillars that defines the contents of the U.S. and South Korea relation. One is, as we just been talking about, our alliance with the United States, and also our free trade agreement with the United States. We are the only country in Asia that has military alliance and so-called economic alliance. We want to cherish it. And if one party thinks it's very unfair, then why not take a look at it? But that doesn't necessarily mean that we will accept their demand all the time. The terms of the FTA is like this. You know, even if they make a demand to renegotiate, we have to agree it. One party has to, all the parties in the free trade agreement has to agree, and it essentially requires our agreement anyhow. So then we're going to go through our own intensive review. But also we want to signal to American people as well as American government that we're not a free rider because we pay our due contribution for U.S. forces in South Korea. And also we import about 30 to 50 billion US dollar worth of military equipment. And also we have a free trade agreement. We are very contributing member of the American economy as well. So I think that we want to signal that too.
Well, Korea obviously is an export-driven economy. It has multiple FTAs in place. Some are being negotiated even as we speak. But there is a noticeable shift towards protectionism around the world. What kind of plan does the Moon administration have against that?
As you just mentioned, South Korea cannot sustain our economic growth without import and export. We are a nation of export and trade.
Indeed.
And that basically becomes our engine of growth. Therefore, I think that we want one of the major platforms in Moon's election period was creating jobs. We cannot create more jobs without strengthening our trading elements of our economy. And to do that, first of all, we need to create a very stable environment in and around South Korea. And second of all, we need to do a lot of cleaning in the economic system, raising up the transparency, and also putting down the corruption issues, and much more great leverage and rooms for innovation in the economy.
Chaebol reform was one of President Moon's campaign pledges.
Of course. And also improving the transparency in the economic actors and spending, things like that. And also we need to be able to look at how government spends well. So therefore, all these things will basically put it in a big bucket, if you will, and then create so-called Moon's economy. And at the end of the day, I think they will create a lot of jobs in the economy as well.
Are there any hopes that you personally have for the new administration?
I hope that Moon administration spends more time and efforts on social security and welfare, because I think that's the very important issue for the whole nation. And also, obviously, we need to be able to take the lead in managing and resolving crisis in and around the South Korea, as far as security issues is concerned.
Well, besides Korean citizens, neighboring countries too will probably pay close attention to the future of Korea that the new president envisions. We were able to take a glimpse into President Moon Jae-in's blueprint through our conversation today with Professor Choi Jong-kun, a policy advisor to the Moon Jae-in campaign. Thank you very much, Professor,
Thank you very much.
for sharing your insights with us today.
Pleasure. Thanks.
That's all for this week. Upfront will be back next week. Thanks for watching.